over the past handful of years. Mostly Teamer, but now Teamer again, pretty obsolete at this point. So now he's just playing what is arguably the best one. I think there are situations where Sultai Delver or Jeskai Delver are better, but this looks to be the best Delver deck.
I think so too. Like I said, I've been slowly accumulating the pieces for this, so if I'm ever available for a Legacy tournament, I'll have this deck ready to go. And I do like the Black Splash myself. I'm a big Cabal Therapy fan.
And Chris with a beautiful Volcanic Island, and now a copy Monastery Swiftspear, and perhaps a Gataxian Probe as well to pump it. Yes, sir. Off to a nice start here is Chris, and he knows what he's up against right away, which is Elves. A Green Sun Zenith, a Natural Order, a Creator of Behemoth, a Deathrite Shaman, along with a Forest, a Wooded Foothills, and a Gaia's Cradle. So a pretty good hand there for Jessup, and a really nice start here for Chris.
So there's some flex slots in Blue-Red Delver decks. You see different things kind of hopping in and out of the deck. Unfortunately for Andrew, some of Chris's flex slots here, 3 copies of Fork Bolt in the main deck.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
Jeez. Sometimes you see main deck copies of Pyroblast or other effects there, but 3 Forked Bolts. Somebody does not want to lose to Elves this weekend.
So Chris is on 15 lands. Sometimes you see 16, sometimes you see 15. 3 Fork Bolts, 1 Pyroblast, 1 Spell Pierce, alongside the staple 4 ofs.
Remember Tom Martell at Grand Prix New Jersey, and he was playing Blue-Red Delver, mentioned that he would have loved to cut a land and play 15. And that felt a little bold to me at the time, but players are actually working their way towards playing a 15 land deck.
I think so too. I think 15 is correct.
So few.
Yeah, sometimes it's too many, still.
I suppose that's true. With how few wastelands that are running around too. Doesn't seem like a bad choice. Here's a Deathrite Shaman. Pass the turn back. We'll Jessup over the Pikula. Chris will draw. No buys for him at this tournament, so off to a nice start. Having to play all 4 rounds, sitting at 3-1 with this Blue-Red Delver deck. We'll deploy a Polluted Delta. Now here is a Brainstorm. That, of course, will trigger Prowess for the Monastery Swiftspear. 3 cards coming, and then 2 cards will go back. Looks like among them was a copy of Fork Bolt.
Oh, this is a loaded hand. I mean, there's a Fork Bolt and 2 bolts. Several dazes in Chris's hand that are likely to be good this game.
This might be part of the reason that Ross Merriam has stepped away from Elves for this tournament.
Well, it's, you know, already a Collect plus Force of Will can be a little challenging for Elves. Not all the time, but sometimes. Backed by all sorts of bolts, that's definitely not a good matchup.
And Ross Merriam playing Storm this weekend. He is 4-0 with that deck so far. A deck that he's not terribly familiar with, but said he wants to give himself more options here for 2015 in the Open Series instead of just pigeonholing himself into the same deck every weekend.
It's true. You got to get in the reps at some point, and you don't want to feel like you have to play a deck you feel is bad in the metagame because it's the only one you know how to play well enough.
Brainstorm is done resolving. Polluted Delta will be sacrificed. Now here's Volcanic Island. So Jessup will shuffle the deck here of Pikula. You see him, number 22 on our Open Series leaderboard here for Season 1 of 2015. He had 1 buy coming in. See if Chris has the Fork Bolt, or if he wants to use Fork Bolt to get Deathrite Shaman out of the way. He's got some options as far as what he can use, and he will use Fork Bolt. So bye-bye goes Deathrite. It's an attack here for 3 from Monastery Swiftspear. Jessup down to 15. This is the winning combination for Blue-Red Delver.
And you may wonder why not keep the Fork Bolt in your hand against Elves. And it's because Chris's draw here is so explosive that he may be getting Andrew into bolt range faster than we think.
See what Jessup can put together here on the second turn of the game. He will start by deploying a Wooded Foothills. We know he has a Green Sun Zenith in his hand. And now he will play a copy of Deathrite Shaman. And simply pass the turn back. Pikula will draw. And now this will be a copy of Lightning Bolt to get that off the table and trigger Prowess. His graveyard is building very quickly, of course. Working his way towards Treasure Cruise, as he will attack here for 2. Now 2 days is in hand, not great. 1 day is pretty good. Second day is not all that great, it feels like.
Probably not, but Chris is so far ahead at this point and has a lot of resources to work with that even if he has to double daze something, he's not going to be that far out of it.
See Jessup maybe considering what he wants to search for with this Wooded Foothills. There's a real cost to maybe searching up a Dryad Arbor in this situation. If Chris does have another removal spell, for example.
That's true, though. You had to kind of get through these removal spells at some point anyway. I don't know how much you can let that factor into your decision tree, because his removal spells are going to be good kind of no matter what.
Bayou was the card that I searched for. So we'll go to Andrew's third turn. Copy of Wirewood Symbiote has been found.
Hard to proceed here. There's so many different things for Andrew to play around. And he's also under quite a bit of pressure, too.
It also just makes you wonder if you're Andrew, okay, well, his start has been great. What else does he have in his hand?
Exactly, and what can you afford to play around at this point, too?
Yeah. The 2 Death Rights have been killed. He's off to a great start. He's seen a lot of cards. Wirewood's one of the best cards in my deck. So we'll deploy that. There's a Cradle. 2 green mana here. This is even for 1. We'll see what he wants to search up. Now, Chris does have a copy of Daze, so it looks like the answer is you're not going to get to search up anything. So Daze actually has some functionality here. Not too surprising.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard for that card to be completely dead, especially when paired with the other Daze.
Swiftspear momentarily a 2-3 at this point. I guess it's going to get a little bit bigger. Man, another removal spell here from Chris. Lightning Bolt going to shoot that down.
I think Chris is intending on treasure cruising here, and he just wants to be able to do something with his follow-up mana because he has a land in hand already, and wants to be able to ponder or brainstorm something else post-combat.
There is Treasure Cruise. You called it. So 3 cards coming. I know this is about as one-sided as it gets.
Yeah, it's silly to say, but this card is so good in this deck especially.
And here's a Brainstorm now, going to trigger Monastery Whisper yet again. That thing has played the role of Wild Nakatl in this game. Of course, 2 cards will have to go back for Chris, and he's already played a land for the turn. All things to keep in mind when he is making his decision on what cards to put back. But the way that his deck is built, it's hard to say if he had Elves in mind, but he certainly gives himself a good matchup against it.
Well, 3/4 bolts in the main deck is probably more about the mirror match than anything else.
Sure.
It's a good removal spell, can get Young Pyromancer and a token off the table. But the fact that it also does some pretty valuable work against Elves doesn't hurt the case to put in the deck.
If more people move that way, Elves will be trending downward in this format. And again, we've already seen some players starting to run away from the deck.
Ross deciding to pack it in is telling.
That's a big deal, right?
Because he loves that deck. He feels like it's got a lot of very good matchups. He's experienced with it, has won a bunch of tournaments with it.
He's very good with it, too.
Yep.
Here's Quern Ranger. There's a copy of Windswept Teeth.
And what's really impressive about all this is Andrew's draw has been fine. You know, he's doing stuff every single turn. He just can't get anything going.
And he's got the payoff cards in his hand. Like he has a Natural Order and a Creative Behemoth. Like his draw is perfectly fine. He's got a Cradle in play. I don't think he could complain about his draw at all. Chris's draw has been elite.
Yep.
Here's a Ponder, a little shuffle action here for Chris. Did not like the cards that he saw on top of his deck.
And Chris nearly all the way to being able to Treasure Cruise again, if that comes up.
Doesn't take much for this deck. Best Treasure Cruise deck in the format, which immediately makes it one of the best decks in the format. Ponder done resolving. Young Pyromancer is the mystery card that was found. That card, not all that exciting in this matchup, but not a bad one.
No, it's probably the worst of the threats, but it's slow, and Elves can gum up the ground with 2 toughness creatures, but You need to get something going in play no matter what.
Here's an attack with a 2-3, at least for the moment. Could get bigger. Just taking a look at some things, deciding if he's supposed to block in this situation. He can also, in this situation, sacrifice his Windswept Teeth to go get a Dried Arbor. Now, looks like we might be going lethal. Why not just get the Quern Ranger out of the way and then trigger again? Chris just keeping the board as clear as possible.
Yeah, he wanted to give Andrew an opportunity to chump block there if he was going to, and then when Andrew declined, before damage, kill that thing, which you're going to kill anyway, and get an extra point of damage across.
Yeah. And Windswept Teeth still can become a Dried Arbor at some point. Pikula going to sacrifice the Polluted Delta, dig out a copy of Volcanic Island. Perhaps the follow-up is something like a Delver of Secrets. We will see.
Still in some dazes in hand as well.
Yeah, Chris is in what we like to call the old driver's seat right now. Especially if the Delver flips. As he will deploy that and pass the turn back. Again, using all of his mana. A dream come true. Jessup going to go down to 5.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a turn where Pikula has wasted mana. I think he's used everything every turn.
Dried Arbor will sneak its way into play as Jessup will begin his turn at 5 life. Again, natural order in hand, but Pikula with those dazes can take care of that. Looks like Jessup does have at least one copy of Creator of Behemoth 2. I don't think he has both at this point. Green Sun Zenith is the draw. Yeah, it's funny to say that this is the way that you beat Elves, but this is the way that you beat Elves. Just keep their board clear.
Yep. And Delver of Secrets is a nice part of the formula, though Chris really hasn't needed this game. This has just shown up. They are really susceptible to flyers. Can't kill stuff. Can't block stuff.
Yeah. The trick is just don't get too fancy against them, I think. I think that's what maybe we see players do a little too often is they get a little too fancy against this deck. Just kill their stuff.
Yep.
Green Sun Zenith is trying to be cast here for 2, likely to try to get an Elvish Visionary. Chris has double daze on the Zenith, which does tap Jessup out. And we'll see if the Delver will flip here, and it will not. So Pikula will redeploy a Volcanic Island and come across for 2 points of damage here. Jessup down to 3. Here's a young Pyromancer and passing the turn back. And Jessup will draw a card. It's a copy of Elvish Visionary, what he wanted to search up with his Green Sun Zenith in the first place. And I would be rather surprised and impressed if Jessup could go off this turn or anything like that, but he can maybe craft a bit of a board here.
Well, if he builds up a board and the Delver does not flip, he gets another shot at it next turn. It's a lot of, that's asking a lot.
He needs some breaks.
To put it mildly.
Yeah. And I would be surprised if he gets them, but he can cross his fingers and hope for the best. Cradle gonna tap for 2. Hey, you can tell, you can look at his face, he knows he's in a world of trouble. Now we'll pass the turn back. Checking for Delver again here, will Chris. And 0 for 2.
Okay, well, that was step 1.
Let's see if this is going to be a Swift Spear. Is there even a good attack here? Ish. I think that's what Chris is figuring out right now.
I don't mind this attack right here because if you attack with everything except Delver of Secrets, Nell Sentinel gets into a Swift Spear for free, and there's still lethal coming across. So Jessup has to put either the Visionary or the Dried Arbor in front of something, And if your plan is just to win with Delver of Secrets next turn anyway, you happily throw away 2 of your non-Delver creatures to get rid of 1 of Andrew's because of the implications for Natural Order, Gaia's Cradle, and other things. So I think this attack from Chris is good.
This attack continues on the process of keep Andrew's board small and contained in a roundabout way.
And it also gets complicated because what if the last card in Chris's hand is a spell? Then blocks could be really bad for Andrew. So
yeah, and I think in this situation, if the last card's a spell, Andrew's not winning anyway.
Yes, that's true.
I don't know how much you weigh that into the equation, though I agree with you. If the last card's a spell, it's a disaster.
So yeah, Chris did what he could there. He was able to get a creature off the table, which, seeing as though all those creatures are extraneous at this point, is a good attack.
But that's another small victory.
Yeah, it's not an attack that I think every player in the room necessarily sees. I think that a lot of people's instinct there would just say go. Hope my Delver flips next turn. Hope that Andrew doesn't kill me. But Chris is able to identify that there was a way for him to at least get 1 creature off the table. And that's worth a lot in this spot against someone who has Gaia's Cradle in play and is trying to win with Critterhoof Behemoth.
Well, Jessup has drawn some sort of spell here. It's a copy of Quern Ranger. Looks like Dried Arbor will be generating a little bit of mana here in combination with Quern Ranger. Replay that forest that he's just picked up. Now it's time for Natural Order. He'll sacrifice the Quern Ranger. And I don't believe that this is lethal.
It's 9, 14, 16, 17.
Oh boy.
Is my count. It's 9 pumps from Critterhoof Behemoth, 3 times 3.
Yep.
Plus 5 for Hoof, plus 1 for Sentinel and Arbor.
Jeez.
I count 17 and Chris can block 1 point of it.
I think I'm actually counting the same as, wow.
It's exact lethal.
Wow. +X+X, where X is the number of creatures you control, so that counts itself, of course. So the pump of each creature getting +3/+3 in this instance.
Yeah, so it's you take the number of creatures in play, multiply it by itself.
Yep.
So that's 9, and then add up the power. And there you go. Very impressive stuff. I mean, it looked like Andrew was dead to right there for several turns. He needed a lot of help from Chris to miss on those Delver flips, but was able to get it done.
And it feels so weird for him to win that game. Like, I'm kind of like startled because of, turn 1, Swift Spear Probe, bolt some stuff, 4-bolt a guy, like keep killing your stuff, keep everything contained. And, it's weird to say that the reason that Chris lost because the Delver didn't flip. Like, I can't imagine that's the case. I don't think he did anything wrong.
If Chris does not attack next turn, it's the exact same thing because he lost 5 points of toughness in the attack that were available blockers.
Okay.
And if Andrew has an extra creature in play, it's worth 5 on the attack because 3 times 3 for the number of creatures in play for Critterhoof goes to 4 times 4 plus 1 for the Elvish Visionary that would have been in play. So Pikula lost 5 points of toughness by attacking, but Andrew would have had 5 extra points of power in play had Pikula not attacked. So that's a wash.
Also generating more mana without the Elvish Visionary even in play.
Oh, sure, yeah. Setting aside just straight for the Critterhoof math, and is that lethal? It's a wash on Chris's side whether or not he attacks.
Now, you can see a little bit of frustration there, and I feel the same way too. I mean, that might be the best draw you can have.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was an excellent draw. Andrew didn't really do anything, but again, once things. That's the thing about this matchup. When you don't have Delver of Secrets flipped, it can get a little hairy if the Elf deck is able to go up the ground a little bit because the rest of your deck is attacking on the ground. Maybe you run out of spells for Swift Spear. Your 1/1 tokens from Young Pyromancer aren't necessarily worth very much against Deathrite Shaman and Nettle Sentinel and so forth. And what you just saw can happen when it's Monastery Swift Spear, not Delver of Secrets.
I suppose that demonstrates just the power of this Elves deck as we do turn our attention to the sideboards here. We will start with Pikula and his Blue-Red Delver deck. I mean, he's got 4 bolts in his main deck. Does he have more help?
He does. 4 Cabal Therapies, 2 Pyroblasts, 2 Grafdigger's Cages, a Hydroblast, a Surgical Extraction, 2 Sulfuric Vortexes, 2 copies of Smash the Smithereens, and an Electrickery. The 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage here are good against a variety of cards. Green Sun Zenith, Natural Order, and so forth. And the 1 Electrickery, good against Andrew's deck full of one-toughness creatures. So I got 3 that I like.
Okay. On the other side of things, I got 3 Thoughtseize, 3 Cabal Therapy, 3 Abrupt Decay. Those are the industry standard at this point. A Sylvan Library, a Null Rod, 2 Chokes, a Progenitus, and a Reclamation Stage. So what Jessup is working with here is very reminiscent of what Ross plays in his sideboard.
I can get behind the Chokes, though we're a little slow for this matchup. I think the 1 Progenitus is good to bring in here, and 3 copies of Abrupt Decay seem nice.
Fair enough. Game number 2 going to be underway here in just a moment, but while we do wait, we will talk about Magic's most popular webcomic in Cardboard Crack.
The 4 paperback books are now available on sale for the website at $12.99 a piece. Been very well received, very popular, and again available in paperback form now. $12.99 a piece, available at starcitygames.com/cardboardcrack.
Yeah, we had 3 to start. You see the 4th one there in the back is now part of the group. So if you don't have that 4th one, definitely head over to starcitygames.com/cardboardcrack for more information about that as we do turn our attention back over to the match. And we'll see if Chris can even things up here. You can see he's a little taken aback by that loss. I would be too.
Oh, well, it's definitely, you're in Chris's seat there in the first 3 or 4 turns of the game. You're just clobbering Andrew. It's going exactly to plan there. And then it starts to get a little hairy there when the board starts to develop a bit on Andrew's side, and then you have a Delver, which looks like it's going to be the win. It doesn't flip over the course of 2 turns, and it's hard for that deck to do. There's 33 spells in it, so missing on a Delver flip 2 turns in a row, very unlikely, but that's what it took for Andrew to get game 1.
Julian Nab has chimed in on Twitter, as he's known to do when Elves is on camera. I feel like he has an Elvish radar.
There's some sort of bat signal that gets sent out.
Perhaps he just really enjoys Legacy coverage, which is, of course, also acceptable, but he's saying that he agrees that Elves has lost some of its power. Blue Red Delver is low on hard counters. We want Choke plus Marsh casualties. Going to the casualties.
Sure.
Fun to see.
Well, I mean, people are going to Electrickery, and even cards like Knights of Soul Betrayal are starting to show up in decks because the Delver deck is flush with one-toughness creatures.
So Scalding Tarn to start things off here for Pikula. Not an explosive start like we saw in the last game. But I suppose that didn't work for him, so maybe got to switch it up a little bit.
Well, he still wants Delver. That's his most important card here.
A Forest and a Nettle Sentinel here for Jessup. Chris going to sacrifice his Scalding Tarn very quickly, go down to 19. You have to imagine a Volcanic Island, and there that is.
So if Chris kept his opening hand and said go on turn 1, and is cracking a fetch land like this, I think he must have kept a fairly land-heavy hand. Now, by this deck standards, that could be 3 lands. It's not 5 necessarily. But
no Lightning Bolt to play at the end of turn or anything like that, so it does make you wonder what he has kept. There is Delver. Just a passing of the turn, back Jessup's way. Jessup going to draw a card, didn't get a great look. Does have a Cradle and a Wirewood Symbiote in his hand, along with the Wooded Foothills. Also a Glimpse over there, too, so his hand looks like it might be pretty explosive.
the Glimpse kill is a little hard to cobble together against Blue-Red Delver. They keep your board contained, so you often don't have a lot of mana to work with, and you're also often under pressure, and so you don't have all day to set up the best hand.
Step 1 is an attack here for 2. Pikula going to go down to 17. Wooded Foothills is the follow-up. And here comes a green spell that will trigger Nettle Sentinel to untap, so long as Andrew does remember, which he does. So it's just a Quirion Ranger and a passing of the turn. Take a look at the top card here. Well, Chris, it's a copy of Treasure Cruise. We'll see if he wants to keep that now that the Delver trigger has resolved, because of course he can shuffle it away with Blue Delta, but he's fine drawing the Cruise.
Yeah, it's possible Chris's hand is just very removal heavy right now, and if that's the case, he's definitely happy drawing Treasure Cruise, as it gives him a play pattern of kill your stuff while attacking you with a flipped Delver, and then eventually draw 3.
Well, you mentioned Delver was the important one, and it's here now. And it looks like it's coming into the red zone, and it will. So Jessup's going to go down to 17. It's a tie game.
Marsh Casualties is some filth. That is some filth right there. I had a suggestion for Ross. I was trying to get him to put some Thrytusks in his sideboard. Because this Blue-Red Delver deck, I do not believe can beat a Thrytusk in play.
I think Thrytusk is difficult. I'm dubious about the ability to cast it.
Yeah, Jessup got to what? How much mana last game? 6 or 7? This game he's probably going to be able to get to 6, you know, if you want to talk about factoring in days in the equation.
Sure. What if Foothill's going to get sacrificed here by Jessup? Good on a 16. We'll see if it'll just be a land or if Dryad Harbor is going to come out of that fetch land, especially in combination with Quirion Ranger.
You see these deck lists, these Blue-Red Delver deck lists. They're not beating a Thragtusk in play. That's just too much damage. Blocks too well. Can't bolt it. I mean, you can bolt it, but it's not great to bolt it.
Oh, yes, you can legally bolt that.
Yeah.
Get that thing out of here.
The token there left over still works for your Cradle, can still be sacrificed in natural order. Oh, yeah.
You're a Thragtusk kind of guy.
I am a Thragtusk guy.
Doesn't take a lot to sell me on Thragtusk, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cards.
I don't know if it's worth the sideboard space. What I'm saying is, I don't think these Blue-Red Delver decks could ever beat one if it gets into play.
So if Blue-Red Delver is the best deck, get to work in your Thragtusk deck.
Yeah. Hey, you Nick Fit aficionados out there. Dust off your if-biffy freaks, because it's time.
Well, it looks like it's time for us a copy of Glimpse. There's a Cradle. This could get ugly. Here's a Quirion Ranger. It's time to trigger and draw a card. We'll see if the Ranger resolves. Looks like it will. Quirion Ranger's going to go active, and Chris is going to have a response. And a very quick one at that.
This may be the one Electrickery. Would not surprise me.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's an Electrickery check here. And the big question is this the best spot to use it in? It does seem pretty appealing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem bad. You might be able to get more depending on what Andrew's development is like, but it's also possibly starts casting Deathrite Shamans and Nettle Sentinels, and you feel really bad that you didn't cut off more of his mana when you had an opportunity to do so.
But Chris stopped Andrew very quickly, and there is Electrickery with Overload. Now, the one thing that Jessup does get to do is he gets to add some mana with the Cradle. So it's not over yet. He's got 3 green mana.
So this is one of those spots where it's a mystery. Maybe this Electrickery could have been way more powerful later down the line. Maybe not. I think this is a good spot for Chris.
Wirewood Symbiote. Draw a card. 2 green mana floating. See how well Jessup can rebuild here in this situation. Wants to get the most out of a Glimpse turn that he can.
And now, you know, it's so important to get so much out of this turn because next turn's likely to be a lot worse. He's going to have a lot less mana to work with. And if Chris has more removal rolled up, it could be really, really bad if Andrew doesn't have more to add to the board this turn.
Looks like it's going to be a Zenith now. So not a bad turn here for Jessup, but for Chris, does some nice work. Jessup's going to try to rebuild with Deathrite Shaman in combination with Wired Symbiote and Gaia's Cradle. And again, Elves is so explosive, you can rebuild pretty quick.
You can, but he's not going to have all this time to work with if Chris has more removal. If Chris does not have more removal in hand, Andrew's in great shape. Although it appears his hand is also quite land heavy.
Yeah. Chris very quickly sacrifices his Misty Rainforest. He's on the hunt. There's the land. Got himself an Underground Sea.
Just needs to flash the Beta C on camera once.
You gotta let him know.
Yeah. Not sure if he brought in the therapies, but
this is where I stand. This is who I am.
That's who I am.
And here's a Cruise. And we saw Chris keep that on top of his deck early. So 3 cards coming.
2 mana is so much to spend on 3 cards.
Yeah, you're right. It's a bad deal. They don't make them like they used to.
They do not.
Lightning Bolt will go after Wirewood. Got to keep that board small with Cradle out there. In comes Insectile Aberration. But Jessup's only down to 13. His life total is high, which means he gets to play quite a few more turns here to take advantage of this cradle.
And it's funny to call it flooding out, but Chris has kind of flooded out here both games.
For this deck drawing this many lands, 4 lands, that is flooding out.
There's only 5 lands in the deck that generate mana. There's 10 fetch lands, and then there's a playset of Volcanics and 1 sea.
Sure. A little bit of a risky mana base there, but again, with Wasteland on such a decline, does seem correct.
And you operate on really low resources. You have a million cantrips.
Jessup going to go into the planning stages of this turn. Looks like he's going to start by playing a forest, though a little unsure of himself if he should deploy that forest. Deathrite's going to remove a fetch land here, it looks like, for some mana, so there goes Wooded Foothills. Now it's time for a Zenith, and that's to be for 2, or at least attempt. Daze is live now. And Daze will do just fine. So Zenith is countered. We're going to go back Pikula's way. Insect Operation at the ready to get in the red zone. They're going to bring Jessup down to 10. Now here's a copy of Young Pyromancer. Again, not the most exciting card in the matchup, but might be a way to close the door.
You can see why it's Insect Operation in this matchup and not the other creatures. Andrew just now has to win the game inside of, 3 or 4 turns.
There's no chump block into this thing.
Yeah.
I suppose he could shift roles and have Deathrite Shaman start to gain a little bit of life.
Though you also don't want to be playing, all day against this deck with so many cantrips and treasure cruise and bolts and so forth.
Probably doesn't favor you. Jessup's going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth. He's down at 9. He'll get himself a Bayou.
It makes me wonder if these decks, I hear varying theories on whether or not you're supposed to bring in Abrupt Decay in this matchup, or if it's just for particular troublesome permanents, or you're supposed to bring it against Delver decks as well. I feel like this deck has such an edge when Insect Operation is not involved, that even though it's not a non-combo matchup, it may be worth bringing in.
And, to be fair, when you think of sideboarding, people think it's all or nothing as far as the card's concerned. Maybe you only bring in 1 or 2.
Right.
You don't have to bring in all 3 or 4 if you're playing them. In this instance, Jessup is playing 3, and 3 looks to be the number that most people do play. But you don't have to do that. It's now, here's a Scavenging Ooze. And maybe this is what Jessup was zenithing for 2 for all along. You may have thought it was for a card like Elvish Visionary, but that may not have been the case. It's now Scavenging Ooze is looking to grow. And this is a tough card for Blue Red Delver to beat if it's out there and it's pretty big.
Yeah, Scavenging Ooze is great against this deck because once things get outside of bolt range, it's pretty hard for Blue Red Delver to get them off the table, period. On top of that, once Andrew runs out of creature seed, he can shift gears, start attacking Chris's graveyard, and then Treasure Cruise is offline for the rest of the game.
Yep. It's red zone time. And there's a Grafdigger's Cage.
And that's all 5 mana producing lands in Chris's deck.
Yeah.
Maybe you're supposed to play 14. I don't know.
Like, I like cutting lands more than most. I do. I like to cut a land after sideboarding when I'm on the draw. But 14 is, whew, that is short. No matter how low resource the deck is. Here's a Heritage Druid. There's a copy of Pendelhaven. And now the big Scavenging is going to come rumbling across. Cradle activation. Looks like Jessup's going to go oozing again. Nettle Sentinel is going to grow a little bit.
It's a huge deal because Andrew up to 10, meaning that the Flip Delver is now a 4-turn clock.
Even though game 1 was a little strange, and Chris losing it, given just, how strong his hand was. And this game has played out a little bit weird as well, just starting off with the Delver on turn number 2. I think Jessup's played some good Magic here.
I think so too. He's never had an easy mode game. He's had to work for it both times.
not a real boisterous guy, not a lot of mannerisms at the table, but I think he's played both of these games really well given the circumstances.
Yeah, this seems like not the easiest matchup here. And Andrew's done a very nice job of navigating it.
That's right, Shaman activation there.
Of course, assisted by the fact that Chris has been a little light on action.
Absolutely. Jessup's draw for the turn was a copy of Glimpse to go along with a Cradle and a Dryad Arbor in hand. That said, this game is still very close. It's 6-7 in favor of Jessup. Now it is his turn, so he gets to attack here, and he might have Young Pyromancer on chump blocking duty. We'll see. And it's still very close.
Well, the complicated thing here is I think the first order of business here is for Andrew to attack, because you don't want Chris to have a counterspell in his hand, end up triggering Young Pyromancer, and then he has much more ability to chump block the Scavenging Ooze.
Sure. Well, there is the chump block. Heritage Druid may get that point of damage through. Chris is thinking here. Looks like it's going to be a Pendelhaven activation. And it will be. Don't see Pendelhaven a ton in Elves.
No, mostly it's gotten cut.
Yeah. But Jessup does have one.
I don't know, with Fork Bolt on the rise, you know, with very few Wastelands floating around right now, I think one is okay. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily play it, but I wouldn't look at it and say that that looks unjustifiable.
Pikula will draw a card. This is a copy of Gataxian Probe. See Jessup's hand here. A Glimpse and a Cradle, nothing crazy. Daze and Force of Will over there for Chris. Along with the Polluted Delta 2. And he has to extend the hand. The cards did not come together here for him. And Andrew Jessup winning a very strange game number 1 and taking down game number 2 off the back of Scavenging Ooze. Gets the job done. He moves on to 4-1, does number 22 on our Season 1 leaderboard here for 2015. Impressive win.
I mean, that's the best descriptor of it, is weird. I think, you know, Chris probably felt at various times in game 1 and in game 2 that he was on a path to win. And then, you know, game 1, that Delver didn't flip for a while. Andrew was able to navigate the board very well to set up an exact lethal kill. And then game 2, Chris's draw was pretty land heavy. I mean, for a 50 land deck, it's about as land heavy as you're going to see.